$1 million mansion, a glittering charity gala, and a rumor that shattered her world. These were the moments that changed Emily Hayes' life forever. The night she glimpsed her millionaire husband, Rob Anderson, in a corner suite with another woman. Her heart stopped, and her reality came undone. But Emily wasn't one to wilt under heartbreak. In a blaze of fury and determination, she demanded answers. Within hours, she'd contacted high-profile attorney Sarah Miller, filed a lawsuit, and sought to freeze Rob's assets. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. Betrayal, hidden secrets, and shocking revelations lay just beyond the door. Emily Hayes had been raised with modest means in a small Midwest town called Willow Creek. When she first met Rob, it was during a charity event at the luxurious Grandview Hotel in downtown Chicago, where she had been working as an event organizer. He introduced himself with a gentle smile and impeccable charm, claiming to be a philanthropist looking to support children's healthcare initiatives. Emily was drawn to his warmth and what appeared to be genuine kindness. Rob was a man with an understated confidence and a magnetic presence that commanded the room. After weeks of casual dates, mostly at public places like art galleries, fancy brunch spots, and one memorable evening at the Chicago Symphony, Emily found herself swept into Rob's extravagant world. Diamonds, fine wines, designer gowns. These were all new to her. Yet, despite the sudden wealth and whirlwind romance, Rob always seemed open and attentive, making her feel truly seen. But those early days were a stark contrast to what Emily discovered that fateful evening at the Anderson estate. The estate, perched on 10 acres just outside the city, boasted a lush garden, a private lake, and a breathtaking view of the skyline. Rob often hosted lavish fundraisers there, inviting everyone from local politicians to Hollywood celebrities. At one such event, Emily, now Mrs. Anderson for nearly 3 years, noticed her husband had slipped away from the main gathering. When he didn't return, she went searching. She passed the rose garden, circled around the pool house, and eventually found herself outside the upstairs study. A strange giggle echoed through the hallway. With her hand trembling on the doorknob, she peeked inside. There, under the glow of a crystal chandelier, Rob's arms were intimately wrapped around a woman Emily had never seen before. Her world cracked in an instant. In that moment, Emily felt her entire body go numb. She wanted to burst through the door, confront them both, and demand answers. But something stopped her. Instead, she crept backward, heart hammering, tears stinging her eyes, until she found her way back downstairs. She needed to breathe. She needed to think. Throughout the rest of the evening, she maintained her composure with an otherworldly grace she never knew she possessed. She greeted guests, engaged in polite conversation, forced laughter when required. The man she believed was her loving husband eventually reappeared, guiding that same mystery woman around the party with a dazzling smile on his face. Emily watched from a distance. Her mind spiraled, replaying his affectionate gaze, the gentle way he pressed a hand to the woman's back. The reality settled in. Robert Anderson, her beloved husband, was having an affair right there in their home. The next morning, Emily woke early, exhausted but resolute. She needed clarity, so she confronted Rob the moment he walked into the breakfast lounge. He greeted her with a casual kiss on the cheek, as if nothing had happened. But Emily could see the flicker of panic in his eyes when she slid her phone across the marble table, showing him a candid photo she'd managed to snap of him and his companion the night before. Rob's expression froze, and for a moment his perpetual calm facade cracked. He tried to stammer out an excuse, something about a harmless flirtation, a misunderstanding, the woman being a potential investor. Emily felt her stomach churn. She might have believed him once, but the way he'd held that stranger was anything but professional. Before Rob could collect himself, she walked out. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on her shoulders, fueling her next step. Though Emily had never considered divorce or anything drastic, she wasn't naive. Growing up with a single mother, Carol Davis, who struggled to make ends meet, taught her one thing: preparation was everything. She had a friend from college, Jessica Chun, who now worked as an associate at a prestigious law firm in Chicago. Emily left the mansion and sped through winding roads until she reached Jessica's office. Tearing up in the reception area, Emily recounted the entire incident, from the moment she caught Rob in the act to his feeble denials. Jessica, always pragmatic and fiercely loyal, recommended they call in a top-tier attorney specializing in complex divorces and asset management. That was when Sarah Miller's name came up. Realizing how complicated things might get, especially given Rob's wealth and political connections, Emily agreed. She wanted the best, and if it meant going toe-to-toe with her husband's empire, so be it. Within hours, Jessica had arranged a meeting in Sarah Miller's chic downtown office. Emily sat in a plush leather chair, scanning the glossy photos of high-profile clients on the walls, feeling both intimidated and strangely emboldened. Sarah entered with a focused energy, wearing a smart black suit and practical heels. She listened intently as Emily poured out her story. When Emily finished, Sarah's eyes narrowed with professional determination. "We have options," she said firmly, detailing the potential legal strategies. Filing for divorce was straightforward, but if Rob was indeed funneling money or shifting assets around, Emily needed to act fast to ensure she got her fair share. "You'd be surprised," Sarah warned, "how many times wealthy spouses try to hide funds overseas or in obscure trusts once they suspect a breakup." Emily's head swirled, but she knew one thing. She had to protect herself. With a deep breath, she agreed to proceed. On Sarah's advice, they decided to file a petition for divorce and a motion to freeze Rob's assets immediately. Emily wasn't out for revenge, at least that's what she told herself. But she'd poured her heart into the marriage, invested her life in supporting Rob's philanthropic endeavors. She wasn't about to be left with nothing if he decided to vanish half his fortune before the ink on the divorce papers dried. The legal process began with a flurry of phone calls, paperwork, and discreet investigations into Rob's financial dealings. Emily felt both liberated and terrified. Each phone call with Sarah or Jessica revealed more complexities: shell companies, overseas accounts, business partners who might not be entirely legitimate. She discovered that Rob was far wealthier than she'd even realized. The sense of betrayal grew deeper. Not only had he been unfaithful, he'd also kept hidden parts of his life from her. The first real confrontation happened just 3 days after she filed. Emily was alone in the Anderson estate, in the very study where she'd caught Rob cheating. She was packing up some personal belongings when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Rob appeared, face taut with anger, a crumpled envelope in his hand. "You served me divorce papers," he said, voice shaking with fury. Emily tried to stand her ground, but fear twisted in her stomach. Rob looked like a man pushed beyond his limits. "You cheated on me," she responded, her voice surprisingly steady. "There's no going back." Rob launched into an elaborate denial, trying every angle: blame, begging, threats. He claimed her lawsuit was a blatant money grab, accusing her of only wanting his fortune. Emily's hands trembled, but her resolve remained firm. She walked out, letting his accusations echo unanswered behind her. News of the divorce filing spread through Chicago's high society. In a matter of hours, rumors swirled at country clubs, upscale boutiques, and charity luncheons. Emily's phone buzzed nonstop with messages from so-called friends and acquaintances. Some offered fake sympathy, fishing for juicy details. Others criticized her, whispering that she was a gold digger trying to ruin poor Rob Anderson. Public opinion seemed divided. Rob had a long-standing reputation as a philanthropic hero, especially for his donations to children's hospitals. Many found it hard to believe he could have engaged in an affair, let alone hidden a labyrinth of assets. Emily's quiet heartbreak was overshadowed by the scandal of the lawsuit as tabloids and gossip columns exploded with sensational headlines. Millionaire mogul's marriage meltdown. Rob Anderson's dirty secrets. Emily felt exposed, betrayed not just by Rob, but by the so-called friends who relished in her downfall. In the midst of this media storm, Emily found unexpected allies. One evening, she received a call from Eleanor Vance, a longtime patron of the arts. Eleanor and her husband had been close to Rob and Emily, but Eleanor confessed that she had witnessed odd financial dealings over the years. She'd never said anything before, not wanting to stir the waters. Deborah offered to share what she knew about Rob's suspicious transactions, things like off-the-record property deals and shell corporations set up in the Caymans. "I'm not proud of staying silent," Eleanor said, "but I'm willing to help if it means stopping him from hurting more people." Emily felt a surge of gratitude, relieved that she wasn't alone. Perhaps, she realized, some in their circle were more than superficial partygoers. They were individuals of conscience willing to support her in this legal and emotional minefield. Meanwhile, Rob's legal team swung into action. They filed a countersuit claiming Emily had violated prenuptial agreements Emily never even remembered signing. Supposedly, these documents limited her claim on his estate and required her to keep certain marital disputes private. Rob's lawyers accused Emily of defamation, insisting she had tarnished his public image by speaking to the press. The pressure was immense. Paparazzi camped outside Emily's new apartment in a modest downtown building, snapping photos whenever she left to meet Sarah Miller. Journalists hounded her mother for interviews, digging into every aspect of her past. And swirling amid it all were questions about the mystery woman. Who was she, and what role did she play in Rob's business empire? Sarah advised Emily to keep a low profile. But Emily realized that the more she tried to hide, the more the tabloids conjured false narratives about her. As depositions and court hearings loomed, Emily discovered a new layer of deceit. A friend with contacts in city government hinted that Rob was planning to transfer significant capital to a secret bank account in Switzerland. Furious and frightened, Emily relayed this information to Sarah. If that transfer happened before the asset freeze took effect, Emily might lose the financial security she sought, making it nearly impossible to claim what was legally hers. Sarah moved swiftly, filing motions and lobbying the judge for an emergency hearing to freeze Rob's assets immediately, citing the risk of asset dissipation. It was a bold move and an unprecedented one in that jurisdiction. Usually, these matters took months to settle, and judges were reluctant to freeze someone's finances without irrefutable evidence. But the potential for fraud was too great to ignore. The showdown in court was set, and tensions soared to new heights. Standing outside the courthouse with cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions, Emily felt her heart pounding like a bass drum. She spotted Rob exiting his black luxury sedan across the street, flanked by his high-powered legal team. He offered the crowd a tight-lipped smile. The hearing room was surprisingly small, adorned with old wood paneling and a single American flag by the judge's bench. Emily sat beside Sarah Miller and Jessica, her hands trembling beneath the table. Rob's attorney, a seasoned litigator named Mark Stevens, exuded confidence as he argued that there was no credible evidence Rob was hiding assets. But Sarah had prepared meticulously. She presented emails from Eleanor Vance referencing suspicious accounts, photographs of Rob's confidential files, and even a recorded phone conversation provided anonymously that hinted at Rob's intention to offload millions in real estate. The judge listened intently, scowling as he leafed through the documents. After 2 hours of tense testimony and fervent arguments, the judge leaned forward. He reprimanded Rob's team for lack of transparency and expressed concern about the possibility of undisclosed financial maneuvers. "Mr. Anderson," the judge intoned, his voice echoing in the silent chamber, "the evidence is concerning. Therefore, pending further investigation, I'm granting the motion to temporarily freeze your primary liquid assets." A stunned hush fell over the courtroom. Emily couldn't breathe. She glanced at Rob, whose face blanched, eyes flashing with outrage. He whispered something to his attorney before storming out. In the hallway, reporters bombarded Emily with questions. Though her heart hammered, she kept her statement brief. "I have confidence in our judicial system and believe the truth will come out." The cameras captured her every word, broadcasting the image of a determined woman refusing to back down against a powerful millionaire. That night, Emily returned to her apartment and found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a letter from an anonymous source, typed in neat block letters. It warned her of imminent threats, suggesting that Rob might retaliate in ways beyond legal maneuvers. She felt her blood turn cold, recalling stories of wealthy tycoons who went to extreme lengths to preserve their fortunes. Terrified, she showed the letter to Sarah Miller the next morning. Sarah looked alarmed. "I'll hire a private security consultant," she said. "This might just be a scare tactic, but we can't take any chances." Emily reluctantly agreed. A small team of security professionals began monitoring her building's entrance, and she was advised to vary her driving routes. She felt like she was living in a crime thriller rather than a divorce dispute. But if Rob was truly desperate, who knew what he might do next? In an effort to regain some normalcy, Emily decided to pay a visit to her mother, Carol Davis, back in Willow Creek. She arrived in the sleepy town at dusk, seeking solace in the familiar. The small house with peeling white paint stood as a warm reminder of simpler days. Carol opened the door with teary eyes and enveloped her daughter in a hug. Inside, over cups of mint tea, Emily confided everything about Rob's affair, the lawsuit, and the mounting threats. Carol listened quietly, sadness etched across her face. "I always felt there was something too perfect about Rob," she admitted. "You deserved someone honest, someone who didn't hide behind a $1 million smile." Despite the comfort of her mother's presence, Emily's mind couldn't rest. She knew she couldn't stay in Willow Creek for long. Court dates and 1,000 unanswered questions awaited her back in the city. Returning to Chicago, Emily discovered Rob had unleashed a new wave of attacks. Publicly, he insisted Emily was psychologically unstable, citing episodes from her pasta flat-out lie he'd likely fabricated. A swarm of reporters camped outside her apartment, speculating about her mental health. Friends called in confusion. Some even scolded her for dragging Rob's name through the mud. Sarah Miller arranged a press conference at her firm's office to set the record straight. Emily, nerves on edge, stood before a sea of microphones and delivered a measured statement. "These allegations are false. I have never been diagnosed with any mental health condition, nor have I experienced episodes. I'm simply standing up for my rights." She left immediately afterward, tears brimming. The cruelty of Rob's campaign to discredit her felt like a second betrayal, compounding the heartbreak she'd already endured from his affair. Yet, amidst the chaos, a breakthrough arrived. Jessica Chen had been quietly digging into Rob's corporate records. Late one evening, she called Emily, voice trembling with excitement. "I found something big," she whispered. "Rob's name is tied to shell companies that own multi-million-dollar condos in Dubai, plus a luxury yacht and Monaco assets he never declared." Emily's heart pounded. If this was true, it could strengthen her case immeasurably. The existence of hidden foreign properties would prove Rob's efforts to conceal wealth. Jessica promised to pass the information to Sarah Miller so they could present it at the next hearing. That night, Emily scarcely slept. Though the revelations were disturbing, they also gave her a spark of hope. Every new piece of evidence chipped away at Rob's untouchable facade. Perhaps she wasn't fighting an impossible battle after all. Maybe, just maybe, truth would prevail. At the subsequent hearing, Sarah Miller filed additional motions to freeze all international assets tied to Rob Anderson. Predictably, Rob's team fought back, denying any wrongdoing. Mark Stevens produced alleged independent audits, claiming no hidden holdings existed. But Sarah seized on Jessica's evidence: bank statements, property registrations, and even pictures of Rob cruising on the very yacht he claimed he didn't own. The judge, now wary of Rob's denials, allowed more time for forensic accountants to comb through the labyrinth of financial documents. He extended the asset freeze, broadening its scope to include any property or account where Robert Anderson was a beneficiary. A hush fell over the courtroom as the judge spoke those words. Rob looked like he'd swallow glass. Outside, Emily exhaled a shaky sigh of relief. With each legal victory, She felt the grip of Rob's power loosening, though she knew the fight was far from over. In the weeks that followed, Emily wrestled with her emotions. The love she once felt for Rob lingered like a phantom ache. She couldn't deny that they'd shared good times, charity galas where she felt proud of his generosity, heartfelt moments spent planning a future together, evenings gazing at the lake from their bedroom window. But that Rob seemed like a distant memory now. The man threatening her in court, undermining her reputation, and brazenly lying about hidden assets was a stranger. She tried to remember when she'd first noticed cracks in their relationship. Maybe it was when he started taking more business trips without explanation, or when he began making grand promises but never followed through. Despite the pain, Emily steeled herself. This was the path she'd chosen, and she would see it through. She wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for her dignity, her self-respect. One afternoon, as Emily reviewed documents in Sarah's office, a knock at the door startled them both. A young paralegal walked in, looking visibly shaken. "Mr. Anderson's attorneys just served a subpoena for your personal diaries and journals," she said, handing over a stack of papers. Emily felt her cheeks burn. She had never kept a detailed diary, but the attempt to pry into her private thoughts was alarming. Sarah read through the subpoena, her expression turning grim. "They're trying to build a narrative that you're emotionally unstable and vindictive," she explained. "We'll file a motion to quash this, but it's a reminder of how far Rob is willing to go." A wave of indignation washed over Emily. It wasn't enough for Rob to cheat and lie. He wanted to scour her most personal moments, all for the sake of destroying her credibility in court. That evening, Emily retreated to her apartment, bolting the door against the world. She sank onto the couch, hugging a throw pillow, feeling utterly drained. A year ago, her life was filled with optimism, plans for children, philanthropic projects, even the possibility of expanding their charitable foundation. Now she was mired in depositions, asset traces, and vicious public speculation. She closed her eyes, recalling the last words her mother spoke before she left Willow Creek. "Hold on to your truth, Emily. People can spin lies all they want, but if you don't bend, they can't break you." She repeated those words like a mantra. Finally, summoning her courage, Emily opened her laptop and typed out a statement of her own. She decided to speak directly to the press, carefully and with Sarah's oversight. She would reveal the facts as she knew them. No embellishments, just the stark truth of Robert Anderson's betrayal. The next morning, Emily's statement was published in several reputable outlets, including the Chicago Tribune. She wrote plainly about discovering Rob's affair, about the suspicious financial behavior, and about her desire for a fair divorce settlement. Nothing more, nothing less. She didn't mention the intimidation tactics or the threatening letter. Instead, she let the evidence of hidden assets speak for itself. Almost immediately, social media lit up. To Emily's relief, a growing number of voices expressed sympathy and support, condemning Rob's actions. Over time, the narrative shifted slightly. People began to see beyond the tabloids' sensational headlines and question the philanthropic image Rob had so carefully cultivated. Rob's PR machine fired back, releasing a glossy interview in which he insisted he was the victim of a vindictive spouse. But for the first time, people seemed less inclined to believe him. As the divorce case neared its most critical stage, Emily's nights were haunted by nightmares. Rob towering over her, gavel in hand, banishing her to a life of isolation and poverty. She'd wake in a cold sweat, gasping for air, only to find herself alone in her tiny apartment. Yet each day, she donned her armor of resolve and faced new legal challenges. She sat through excruciating depositions, endured the scorn of Rob's attorneys, and battled the relentless swirl of public gossip. Each time Rob tried to twist facts or smear her character, Sarah produced evidence that steadily eroded his defenses. Slowly, methodically, the puzzle pieces were coming together. The yacht in Monaco, the condos in Dubai, the secret Swiss account. Emily could almost see the day she'd stand victorious in court, the day she'd reclaim her life and her pride. Then came an unexpected twist. A woman named Maria Rodriguez reached out to Sarah's office, claiming to be Rob's former personal assistant. Nervous and hesitant, she confessed she had direct knowledge of Rob's illicit dealings. Maria said she could provide concrete proof mails, bank transfers, phone call recordings, but she was scared. Rob had once threatened to ruin her career if she ever turned on him. Emily and Sarah arranged a discreet meeting at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. Maria arrived looking over her shoulder as if she expected Rob to materialize at any moment. She produced a folder stuffed with documents. "He made me sign NDAs," Maria whispered. "But I can't keep quiet anymore. Not after what he did to you." Flipping through the folder, Emily's eyes widened at the incriminating details. Transfers from Rob's main company to offshore accounts. This could be the smoking gun they needed. The next day, Sarah Miller filed new motions with this fresh evidence. Rob's attorney, Mark Stevens, tried to dismiss Maria's testimony as the ramblings of a disgruntled ex-employee. However, the authenticity of the documents was quickly verified by forensic experts. Suddenly, Rob found himself cornered. As tensions mounted, rumors circulated that Rob was considering an out-of-court settlement. He feared a lengthy trial would expose more of his secrets, tarnishing his carefully maintained image beyond repair. Yet, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that he was stalling, waiting for an opportunity to strike back or shift funds one last time. Sarah cautioned Emily to stay alert. If Rob decided to settle, it might come with conditions like strict confidentiality clauses. But Emily was beyond caring about hush money. She wanted accountability. She was determined to stand her ground, no matter how fiercely Rob fought to maintain control. The court date for the next major hearing arrived under the weight of an overcast sky. Emily dressed in a simple navy suit, her hair pulled back neatly. As she entered the courthouse, she spotted a throng of reporters again, but she also saw familiar faces, friends like Eleanor Vance and Jessica Chun, there to offer moral support. Even her mother was in the crowd, holding Emily's hand briefly before she stepped into the hearing room. Rob was already inside, pacing near the defense table. His skin looked pale, and his eyes brimmed with a jittery anger. When proceedings began, Sarah systematically presented the newly obtained documents from Maria Rodriguez. The judge examined them, asked questions, listened to both sides. By midday, it was clear the court had seen enough to suspect significant financial impropriety. Rob's team requested a recess to consult privately. The tension in the room was palpable. During the recess, Rob surprised everyone by approaching Emily in the hallway. He held his hands up in a gesture of surrender. "We don't need to fight like this," he said, voice low. "We can work out an arrangement." For a fleeting moment, Emily glimpsed the Rob she once knew, the caring philanthropist, the man who'd first swept her off her feet. But she also remembered his betrayal, the lies, the smear campaign, the hidden assets. She met his gaze. "We could have Rob," she replied, "but you made it impossible." He swallowed hard and reached into his pocket, pulling out a handwritten note. "My settlement offer," he said, thrusting it at her. Emily took it, scanning the figures. It was a substantial sum, enough to ensure she'd live comfortably for the rest of her life. But it came with a catch, a strict non-disclosure agreement about his affairs. Emily's heart pounded as she read the terms. She could end this war now. No more court battles, no more invasive questions, no more paparazzi. But she'd have to bury the truth, pretend the affair and the underhanded asset hiding never happened. She'd be free financially, but gagged morally. When she looked up, Rob's expression was calm, almost smug. He assumed she would jump at the chance to walk away from the drama. She shook her head slowly, handing back the note. "I can't," she said. "I won't be silenced." Anger flared in his eyes. He snatched the paper and stormed off. Emily watched him go, shaky but resolute. Perhaps turning down that money was foolish. But she realized something vital. She needed justice, not just a payout. She walked back into the courtroom, prepared for whatever was next. The hearing resumed, and the judge pressed both sides for clarity. Sarah Miller reiterated the evidence, the affair, the financial duplicity, the intimidation attempts. Mark Stevens tried to undermine Maria Rodriguez's credibility, but each time Sarah countered with another piece of corroborating evidence. Eventually, the judge announced his ruling on the temporary measures. The asset freeze would continue and expand to include any account or property discovered during the ongoing investigation. Moreover, the judge suggested that if further wrongdoing was uncovered, Robert Anderson could face criminal charges for fraud or perjury. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Rob sat rigid, staring straight ahead. Emily's pulse throbbed in her ears. She knew this was a monumental victory, yet it felt surreal. She'd gone from a naive event organizer to a woman standing on the verge of defeating one of the city's most influential figures. Outside, the press ambushed them again. Rob rushed past, ignoring the barrage of questions. Emily stood with Sarah Miller at her side, delivering a concise statement. "I'm grateful the court has taken steps to protect my rights. The truth is what matters most here." She retreated to a nearby cafe, adrenaline still surging. Jessica and Eleanor joined her, exchanging hugs and tearful smiles. "You did it," Eleanor said softly. "You really stood up to him." But Emily couldn't bring herself to fully celebrate. The final trial was still ahead, and she knew Rob wouldn't back down easily. There were still details to unearth, more secrets that could emerge. And beyond the legal struggle, she also had to heal personally from the betrayal, from the public scrutiny, from the collapse of the life she once believed was perfect. For now, though, she savored a small taste of triumph. Over the next few weeks, forensic accountants kept uncovering evidence of Rob's deceptive practices. Each new revelation painted a damning portrait of a man willing to manipulate his philanthropy, business ventures, and personal relationships to maintain a veneer of respectability. Meanwhile, Rob's legal team scrambled to discredit sources. They claimed that Maria Rodriguez had been bribed, that Eleanor Vance bore a personal grudge, that Emily had orchestrated a grand scheme to frame Rob. Yet none of these accusations held up under scrutiny. It was a media circus. Talk shows debated the scandal, with some hosts defending Rob's philanthropic track record while others condemned his apparent hypocrisy. Late-night comedians even made jokes about hidden yachts and questionable Swiss accounts. Emily watched it all with a sense of detachment. Her pain was real, but had become fodder for national entertainment, and she couldn't entirely escape that reality. Amid the legal wrangling, Emily's personal life stood in shambles. She'd lost friends who sided with Rob out of fear or loyalty. She avoided major social events, uncertain whether she'd face hostility or pity. The only bright spots were the unwavering support of her mother, Jessica, Eleanor, and a handful of true friends who believed in her. During this time, she rekindled old passions, writing poetry, practicing yoga, volunteering at a local shelter. These small acts gave her a sense of purpose beyond the courtroom drama. She began to realize that she wasn't just fighting against Rob. She was fighting to rediscover herself, her identity, after years of molding her life around his pursuits. One late evening, she penned a poem about resilience, tears slipping down her cheeks. Maybe, she thought, this heartbreak would be the crucible that forged a stronger version of herself. As the final trial date approached, Rob made one last desperate move. His lawyers filed a motion to remove the presiding judge, alleging bias. They produced quotes from prior hearings, claiming the judge had shown a consistent prejudice against Rob's wealth. The stunt caused a brief delay but ultimately failed. The appellate court found no grounds for recusal. Yet the maneuver signaled just how far Rob was willing to go. It fueled Emily's anxiety, knowing he still had cards to play. She braced herself for the possibility that new damaging information about her might surface, though she couldn't imagine what else Rob could concoct. And then, in a twist that surprised everyone, the identity of the mystery woman finally surfaced. A tabloid obtained photos of her with Rob on a private jet. She was identified as Olivia Monroe, a high-powered consultant known for her ruthless business tactics. The saga deepened. Olivia Monroe. Her name alone carried an aura of intrigue. Rumors about her influence on Rob's finances spread like wildfire. Some said she was his silent partner, advising him on secret offshore investments. Others claimed she was the mastermind behind his entire operation. Emily felt a strange mixture of relief and fury. At least now the woman had a name and face, dispelling the painful mystery. But the fact that Olivia might have orchestrated Rob's deceit made his betrayal even more palpable. Word reached Emily that Olivia was preparing to testify on Rob's behalf, presumably to challenge the narrative around his finances. Sarah, however, wasn't fazed. If they want to put her on the stand, that could backfire, she remarked. We have more than enough evidence to contradict anything she says. Still, the thought of facing Olivia in court filled Emily with dread. She braced for yet another confrontation. The morning of the trial's opening arguments arrived in a blur of tension. Emily had hardly slept the night before. She dressed carefully, choosing a charcoal gray suit and a simple pendant necklace her mother had given her years ago. It felt like armor, an emblem of her roots and the resilience she'd inherited. When she walked into the courtroom, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Journalists packed the gallery, laptops open and cameras at the ready. Rob sat at the defense table, stoic, Olivia Monroe by his side, whispering to Mark Stevens. She wore a power suit in deep burgundy, exuding confidence. Sarah Miller began her opening statement with measured precision, outlining Rob's pattern of financial deception, the evidence from Maria Rodriguez, and a suspicious timeline of overseas transfers. She ended with a quiet but firm assertion. This case is about truth and ensuring that my client, Mrs. Hayes, receives justice. Mark Stevens responded by painting Rob as a generous philanthropist, misunderstood and maligned by a vengeful spouse. He lambasted Emily's aggressive tactics and accused her of orchestrating a smear campaign. Olivia Monroe nodded in agreement, occasionally whispering suggestions to the defense team. Witness testimonies followed. Eleanor Vance took the stand, describing the suspicious activity she'd witnessed. Maria Rodriguez testified next, her voice trembling, but her story consistent and damning. She detailed how Olivia Monroe guided Rob in transferring funds to obscure accounts. She even provided dates and account numbers. The defense tried to poke holes, questioning Maria's credibility and highlighting her departure from Rob's employment on strained terms. Yet each jab felt insufficient against the weight of the physical documents she provided. The tension was palpable as the gallery hung on every word, searching for cracks in the narratives. Then it was Olivia Monroe's turn to take the stand. The courtroom stilled as she stood up, every eye fixed on her striking figure. She wore a sleek burgundy pantsuit and a calm, collected expression, as though the entire proceeding was just another boardroom pitch. With practiced poise, she walked to the witness box and sat, folding her hands in her lap. Her voice, when she began, was crisp, authoritative, and free of any trace of guilt. I'm a business consultant, Olivia stated. I was hired by Mr. Anderson to advise on international expansion strategies. At no point did I assist him in hiding assets or misleading anyone, including his wife. Sarah Miller, seated beside Emily, leaned forward slightly, noting Olivia's deliberate choice of words. The air in the room shifted. This wasn't just testimony, it was a performance. Olivia continued, denying all allegations. She dismissed an email referencing avoiding scrutiny as a misunderstood industry phrase. It referred to competitive market analysis, she claimed, nothing to do with a divorce. Emily sat motionless, eyes locked on Olivia. Every denial felt like a slap. This was the woman who'd stood in their home, whispered in Rob's ear, guided him through the maze of deceit. The audacity of her confident denials made Emily's stomach churn. Sarah approached the podium for cross-examination. Ms. Monroe, let's go over the timeline, she began, tone calm but sharp. You were in frequent communication with Mr. Anderson in the weeks leading up to his wife's discovery of hidden assets. Correct. Yes, Olivia said. We were working on a new investment vehicle in the Middle East. Sarah clicked her remote, and the courtroom screen flickered to life, displaying a series of emails, many of them between Olivia and Rob. The subject lines were technical, but one stood out: urgent, trust structuring to shield holdings. Care to explain this one? Sarah asked. Olivia shifted. It was a legal conversation around forming a trust to protect business interests. Standard. Sarah's voice sharpened. Standard? Then why does this email, dated 1 week after Mrs. Hayes confronted her husband, mention the need to reroute investments before the asset freeze request goes through? A murmur rippled through the gallery. Olivia blinked rapidly, her composure visibly cracking for the first time. I can't speak to Rob's intentions, she said. I just followed instructions. I wasn't aware of any legal filings. Sarah pressed further, presenting internal memos that included Olivia's annotations, some even in her handwriting. One clearly read, "Move fast, no paper trail." Olivia stammered. These could have been misinterpreted. "You're under oath, Ms. Monroe," Lisa interrupted, her gaze unwavering. Silence hung heavy in the air. Olivia's fingers tapped nervously on the wooden edge of the stand. Her earlier confidence dissolved into a growing unease. From her seat, Emily saw the shift in the jury's expressions. Doubt had crept in. They were no longer seeing a sophisticated consultant. They were seeing someone implicated, someone with too much access, too much knowledge, and too many reasons to lie. Sarah concluded her cross with a piercing statement. "Ms. Monroe, you didn't just consult, you conspired. And the evidence shows it." The judge called for a brief recess, allowing the courtroom to breathe. Olivia stepped down, face pale, lips tightly pressed. Rob avoided her gaze. Back at their table, Sarah turned to Emily. "She's rattled, and that helps us a lot." Emily exhaled slowly, her heart pounding. For weeks, she had feared Olivia's testimony would destroy her case. But now, the cracks in Olivia's mask were visible to everyone. The woman who had once operated from the shadows now found herself under the harshest light, and she was beginning to crumble. As the courtroom doors closed behind Olivia, Emily felt a subtle shift in momentum. The tide was turning. Truth, after months of suffocation, was finally clawing its way to the surface. The trial pressed on like a war of attrition. Every day in court felt like a battlefield, and on the final day of witness testimony, the atmosphere was charged with unspoken anticipation. Robert Anderson was called to the stand. He adjusted his tie with a measured calm, walking slowly to the witness box as cameras outside continued flashing through the courthouse windows. Dressed in a tailored gray suit, he wore the same carefully constructed expression of dignity he had worn at every gallant photo op for years. As he took the oath, his gaze drifted briefly toward Emily. She didn't flinch. She'd spent months preparing for this moment. Rob's attorney, Mark Stevens, began the direct examination. His tone was sympathetic, almost theatrical. "Mr. Anderson," he asked, "can you explain your business dealings that have been so harshly scrutinized in recent weeks?" Rob spoke with the calculated grace of a politician. "I run a multifaceted business empire. It involves multiple countries, countless accounts, and teams of advisors. I never intended to hide anything from anyone, least of all my wife." He sighed dramatically. "If there were errors, they were administrative, not malicious. I trusted consultants like Olivia Monroe to handle financial logistics. I regret not monitoring everything more closely." To the untrained ear, he sounded credible, even remorseful, but Emily saw the familiar flicker in his eyes, manipulation wrapped in polished charm. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Sarah Miller stood, her legal pad in hand, and walked toward the witness box. "Mr. Anderson," she began, "do you deny threatening Maria Rodriguez with professional retaliation if she exposed your financial arrangements?" Rob stiffened. "Absolutely. I never threatened anyone." Sarah nodded, flipping through documents. "So this voicemail," she clicked a button on her laptop, "isn't your voice?" The courtroom filled with Rob's unmistakable tone, harsh and low. "You don't want to make enemies out of people who pay your salary. Think about your future." Gasps broke out. Rob's face turned a shade paler. "That was taken out of context," he stammered. Sarah didn't blink. "Was this also taken out of context?" She held up a printout of an email chain between Rob and Olivia discussing offshore accounts. One line from Rob read, "Move the money before she gets the courts involved." Rob hesitated again. "I was referring to a business restructuring, not hiding fund for my wife." Sarah tilted her head. "And the timing? One day after Mrs. Hayes confronted you about your affair? That's coincidence." The pressure mounted with every question. Rob began to unravel, not dramatically, but in subtle, telling ways. He blinked more often. His answers came slower. He glanced towards Olivia for reassurance, but she kept her eyes locked on the table. Sarah's final question silenced the room. "Mr. Anderson, you've portrayed yourself as a victim of media attacks, a betrayal by employees, even of your wife. But isn't the truth far simpler? You cheated. You lied. You hid millions. And now you're trying to rewrite the narrative because you got caught." Rob's mouth opened, then closed. The room waited, but no defense came, not even from Mark Stevens, who quietly shuffled his notes. As Sarah returned to her seat, she whispered to Emily, "We just tipped the scale." Closing arguments followed swiftly. Sarah spoke with quiet confidence, weaving a clear and damning story from the months of evidence and testimony. "This is not about bitterness," she said. "It's about betrayal, about truth, about accountability." Mark tried one last time to recast Rob as a flawed but generous man. He invoked Rob's charity work, his reputation, and even his emotional turmoil. But the energy in the room had shifted. Outside, reporters lined the courthouse steps. Rob exited first, walking briskly past flashing cameras, face tight. Olivia trailed behind him, stone-faced and silent. Emily emerged moments later, flanked by Sarah and Jessica. She didn't speak to reporters that day. She didn't have to, because by now, the world had started to see through Robert Anderson, and it was Emily's truth they believed. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as everyone waited for the judge to return with his written decision. The tension in the air felt as thick as fog. Emily sat in the front row, flanked by Sarah Miller and Jessica Chun. Her hands were cold despite the warmth of the courtroom, clenched tightly in her lap. Across the room, Rob sat rigid, jaw clenched, Olivia Monroe by his side. Their polished exterior remained intact, but Emily could see the stiffness in Rob's movements, the subtle tells of a man expecting defeat. Rain trickled down the tall courtroom windows as the judge finally entered. The room fell into silence, broken only by the shuffling of papers and the occasional cough. The judge adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began to read from a printed sheet. After reviewing the substantial volume of evidence, including financial documents, email communications, testimony from key witnesses, and cross-examinations presented by both parties, this court finds that Mr. Robert Anderson willfully concealed marital assets in an effort to deprive Mrs. Emily Hayes of her lawful share in divorce proceedings. A quiet gasp escaped from somewhere in the gallery. Emily inhaled sharply, eyes locked on the judge as he continued. Furthermore, the court acknowledges a pattern of coercion, intimidation, and manipulation directed at Mrs. Hayes and at third-party witnesses. These actions are incompatible with the obligations of good faith expected in legal proceedings. The judge paused, glanced over his reading glasses at Rob, then continued. Accordingly, the court grants Mrs. Hayes a divorce under terms favorable to her. She shall be awarded a comprehensive settlement that includes ownership of the couple's Chicago estate, a significant share of Mr. Anderson's disclosed and undisclosed assets as verified by forensic investigation, and continued protection under the asset freeze until all hidden accounts are accounted for. Rob's eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a bitter line. Olivia looked stunned, her face pale. The judge wasn't done. In addition, he said firmly, this court is forwarding evidence of potential financial fraud and perjury to the state attorney's office for further investigation. That final sentence landed like a bomb. A ripple of shock spread across the room. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Rob's posture collapsed ever so slightly, the image of power slipping away in real time. Emily sat frozen, overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions. Relief, justice, vindication, and a strange, sudden weightlessness. After everything, the betrayal, the threats, the humiliation she had won, Sarah leaned toward her and whispered, "We did it." And he's not just exposed, he's vulnerable. The judge concluded the hearing with a nod and a stern reminder for both parties to comply with post-trial reporting. Then he stood and left, robe flowing behind him. As the room stirred to life, Rob rose, muttering something to his attorney. He refused to look at Emily. Olivia followed him out like a shadow, no longer whispering instructions, no longer in control. Emily remained seated a moment longer, soaking it all in. The cameras were already swarming outside, and she knew the questions would come. But this moment, this one right here, was hers. When she finally stood, Sarah and Jessica embraced her tightly. "I feel like I can breathe again," Emily whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. Outside, the sky was still gray, but to her, it looked brighter than it had in months. Reporters surged toward her, mics outstretched, but this time Emily faced them without fear. She spoke clearly, calmly. "I'm grateful the court recognized the truth. This was never about vengeance. It was about justice, about refusing to be silenced." She didn't need to say more. Her poise, her strength, and a verdict said it all. That night, Emily returned to her apartment, set down her keys, and looked out over the city lights. For the first time in a long while, she felt free. Not because she'd defeated Rob, but because she'd reclaimed herself, her name, her story, her future. And this time, it belonged to her alone. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She felt tears welling as relief, vindication, and overwhelming emotion washed over her. She turned to Sarah and Jessica, embracing them, scarcely believing it was over. Rob's face was a dark mask of fury. Olivia stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Outside, reporters bombarded Emily with questions, but for the first time, she felt at peace facing their cameras. She spoke clearly. "I'm grateful to the court for recognizing the truth. This wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness and dignity." That evening, in the quiet of her apartment, Emily allowed herself a moment to weep for the marriage she had lost, for the illusions that had shattered. Yet she also felt a new sense of freedom blossoming within her. A chapter of her life had closed, and though scarred, she emerged standing tall. In the end, Emily Hayes found more than just a legal victory. She reclaimed her voice, her identity, and her future. The court's ruling froze Rob's elaborate web of secret holdings, forcing him to face the consequences of his betrayal, including the looming threat of criminal charges that would, in time, lead to his conviction and a significant prison sentence, stripping him of the ill-gotten gains and the respect he had so falsely curated. Olivia Monroe, implicated and disgraced, faced her own legal battles and saw her career crumble. Emily, however, chose a different path. With the settlement, she established a foundation dedicated to helping women navigate difficult life transitions, particularly those recovering from betrayal and financial abuse. The Anderson estate, once a symbol of her shattered dreams, was transformed into a haven, a retreat center offering support, legal aid workshops, and healing programs. She found joy in this new purpose, her empathy and resilience inspiring countless others. Years later, Emily found love again, a quiet, steady partnership with a kind architect named David, who admired her strength and cherished her for who she truly was, not for any status or wealth. They built a life based on honesty and mutual respect, often spending weekends in Willow Creek with her mother, Carol, surrounded by genuine warmth. Emily's laughter became a frequent sound, her eyes bright with a hard-won peace. She had not only survived, she had thrived, turning her pain into power and her ordeal into a beacon of hope for others. If this story captivated you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more true-to-life drama and inspiring tales of resilience. Every click you make helps us continue bringing you stories of triumph, heartbreak, and the unyielding power of the human spirit. Join our community, share your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned. More riveting narratives are just around the corner.